So Martin, thank you very much for your time.
Nice to be here, Anna.
Despite your very successful business with S4 Capital, you're still widely recognized as the founder of WPP.
Bit unfair on S4 Capital, Anna. You want to keep the balance right. They'll get upset.
I know, but it did grow to be the biggest advertising agency in the world.
We did that with Saatchi's too, actually. People forget that. We did that twice. So
I'm
we have to do it for a third time.
I want to know, how old were you when you founded WPP? There is a reason I'm asking you that.
I was 40 years old. So that was when my dad said, that was the midpoint. Now, of course, in his time, when you had a 40-year career, so when you started when you were about 20, although he started when he left school at 13, and you went on until you were about 60. So here I am at 79, still going. So careers have changed in terms, and with AI and digital twins, we might live to be 120. So the midpoint would be, certainly it wouldn't be 40 anymore. But 40 was the year when you look back on the first 20 years of your working career and you look at the next 20 and you have to decide, you have to assess what you've done and you look at what you do in the future. My father used to say, build a reputation, find an industry that you find fun, find a company in it that you enjoy, build a reputation, and then when you're 40, he used to say, if you want to go and start something on your own, go and start something on your own.
If you were 40 now, what industry would you choose?
Well, our industry still offers an awful lot. I mean, there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of challenges at the same time. Obviously, there are two fundamental forces that operate. One is geographical and one is technological. The geographical forces are very different, I think, for the next 30 or 40 years that there have been to the last 30 or 40 years. We can go into that. And the technological forces continue to move at great speed. People are very concerned about regulation and concerned about a control and concerned about trying to regulate technologies which are moving at light speed and which have thrown up big social issues in relation to children, in relation to society, in relation to politics, in relation to consumer safety, that people are grappling with. So those two buckets of geography and technology always influence everything you do. And at the moment, I think we're going through seismic change in terms of what we've seen in the recent years and what we will see in the future in both cases. Geographically, here we are in Brazil, here we are with one of the BRIC countries. I mean, the simple fact is the E7, that's the so-called, I hate using the word emerging because they've emerged, but the so-called emerging markets, the big seven, including China, are actually bigger than the G7 in terms of GDP. And if you strip out US from G7 and make it a G6, and China from E7 and make it E6, the E6 would be bigger than the G6. So the balance of power in the world is shifting quite dramatically. And countries like Brazil probably rail a bit against Western domination, the US in particular, and Western Europe setting the agenda. And the G7 or the G6 are being eclipsed by the E7 or the E6. And the world it's a very different order. So you see, if I was running Brazil, or running a country, I too will probably take the view that I should get the best of both worlds, both from the West and the East, if I can put it that way, or the old world and the new world. And clearly you see China, you see Russia, you see North Korea, you see Iran railing against what we become used to in terms of the dominating powers in the world. So you've got that going on. Yeah. And then from technologically, you've got huge changes which change the way, for example, in our industry that we relate to consumers and the way that we market to consumers. And the call I just came off, it was interesting because the CEO, one of the major packaged goods companies in the world, was saying, personalization at scale, which is the biggest thing we see going on at the moment. Personalization at scale raises issues about the quantum of advertising that consumers consume and whether consumers will be over bombarded by content if it's highly personalized, and whether then consumers would then react to that and go back to a more focused more emotional maybe appeal in the classic way that we used to do advertising. So those are huge changes taking place both geographically and technologically.
With everything you have just said,
Yeah.
how has advertising had to adapt?
Well, we've had to. I mean, the opportunities for disruptors such as S4 or operating brand Media Monks are huge. So the classic holding companies, which we built at Saatchi's and we built, which is now effectively Publicis, or part of it went into Publicis, and what we did at WPP, I mean, that whole balance has changed. If you look at the holding companies, the leading French holding company, which is now the leader globally. I mean, when I left WPP, 5 or 6 years ago, WPP in terms of market capitalization and size was the biggest. I think WPP is still just by a whisker bigger in terms of revenues, but in terms of market cap, a complete reversal of position. Why is that? Well, Publicis probably have got a better offer, probably got a better CEO, to be personal about it. They've probably got a better offer around data and digital, and they probably explain the story better, and they've probably got a better media buying operation from a proprietary point of view, from their own position. So that's been a big change. But they've had to change the way they've offered, and now you have a sort of first division amongst the holding companies, of which Publicis would be one, Omnicom would be another, and maybe Havas, which is the smaller French entrant, and then IPG and WPP and Dentsu, the Japanese company, probably got a little bit more, a few more strategic problems and tactical problems to deal with as a result. But essentially it's because data and digital has become front and center to our business, and that demands different talents and different abilities. Geographies have changed. I mean, America is still, going back to what we were saying about geography, America is still dominant from an economic point of view. If you think about the world being $108 trillion dollars or so of GDP, US is about 28 trillion, China is about 18. So those two markets together are almost half of the world. So America will continue to be, and here we are in Latin America, and I think that time block, that time zone block of North and South America is going to become hugely important. The growth hotspots in the world become really more important. So North and South America, I think, the Middle East, obviously what His Excellency is doing, the Crown Prince is doing in the context of Saudi Arabia, and not just Saudi Arabia, but the Middle East as a whole, that's a growth hotspot. So figuring out the geographies, really important, apart from the technological bucket, as I put it, figuring out where the growth is really critically important.
Last time we spoke about a year ago, you predicted that there would be a recession, but still growth in digital advertising. How dependent is advertising on the geoeconomic situation?
Well, I mean, if I went back, I think I said it would think that things would slow down, if not a recession. I mean, technically there was a recession in parts of Europe, if not Europe as a whole, if you define it as 2 quarters of negative GDP growth. America has not gone into recession, and that's one of the reasons why we haven't seen interest rates being cut, although we've seen it in some with Switzerland, Sweden, and then we've seen, the ECB start to cut. No, I think what's happened with the technology companies, the irony has been that on the advertising side, digital advertising continues to grow. Here we are in Brazil. This year, I think the forecast for Brazilian advertising, which is about 2.5 trillion in terms of size, it is forecast to grow by about 7%. That growth is going to be all digital, with linear again under pressure, like you see in North America with Disney and CBS and NBC and others. The linear networks are under pressure. So you'll see that again this year. So digital will grow, but linear will be either flat or down because of the pressures for the industry and for companies like Disney as well. So I think we'll see a continuation of that. What we've also seen with the technology platforms, the irony has been their ad revenues have been growing. Last year, on average, the big 6 platforms, the 3 in the West and the 3 in the East grew by about sort of 10 to 11, 12%. But they had their year of efficiency. We saw that with Facebook, with Meta. Mark Zuckerberg took the message from the stock market that he should cut costs and announce a year of efficiency. So despite the fact that ad revenues were growing, their spend on advertising and marketing services declined. Published figures for Meta, for example, probably agency fees were down about 25%. Not so for all of the tech companies, but the pressure was there. That's continuing this year. It hasn't reversed yet. But with the competition around AI, and we saw the launch of AI by Apple, or not the launch, but by the reinforcement of their AI offer yesterday at the developers conference, I think advertising by the tech companies will start to expand again. And that's a category that represents about 50% of our revenues, and it will continue to grow.
Back to your homeland.
Yeah.
How will the results of the election impact the business climate in the United Kingdom?
I think we're probably faced with a Labour government for the next 5 to 10 years, probably 2 terms. And I think it raises questions for business. And I think going back to what we were saying about geography, the parts of the world that are really from an investment point of view and if you're trying to run a mini global company or indeed a maxi global company, we're a mini global company, what do? You focus on North and South America, you focus on the Middle East, despite the political uncertainty there and the Iranian issue. You focus on Asia Pacific, again, despite the uncertainty around Taiwan. India is an alternative, Indonesia, Vietnam, Thailand, the Philippines, Singapore, Malaysia. And Europe, I think Africa is too volatile, but you move, as far as Europe is concerned, that probably moves down the agenda, because again, you have the Russian issue, what will Putin do, not just in relation to Ukraine, but beyond Ukraine.
In general.
So the uncertainty, I think, drives it that way. Technologically, what's interesting, Europe is a big opportunity, because if it is more of a cost opportunity, the technology gives you the chance to lower costs and become more efficient and maybe make profitability in Europe even more effective. So it's not a dead cause, it's an opportunity to use the technology for benefit.
Are you ever tempted to enter the political life of Britain?
No, it's difficult enough doing commercial stuff without worrying about politics. In politics, you have very few levers. You have the power of persuasion, obviously, but you have very few financial levers to encourage people to put it that way. So it's quite difficult. And in a world, I think this is a very, very different world to the last 40 years. I think we lived through a golden age. The post-World War II age, particularly after the late 1980s, the Thatcher-Reagan years. I mean, a lot of people say you get survivor bias, that if you live through things, you look back and say, look, things were better then. I think this is very different. I think we're going through an era of if not deglobalization, certainly deprioritization of that. So looking at the regions that I mentioned. So globalization is not. And I think fragmentation, political uncertainty is going to be with us for many, many years. This tension between the old order and the new order, I think, is a real phenomenon that the West is going to find very difficult to get their minds around. Particularly the Americans. Now that doesn't mean America will be eclipsed. I don't think it will be, but it means that you will have, a 2-horse race or a multi-horse race rather than just one.
Thank you very much, Sir Martin.
Pleasure. Thank you, Anna. Thank you.